Okay, it's story time. So basically what happened, 2017, I graduated and I was living in Utah. My dad, we're all from Colorado, so my dad was in Colorado. I ended up flying to Seattle and I met my dad there, and we flew from Seattle to Juneau, Alaska, and then from Juneau, Alaska, we flew to a place called Gustavus, I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, we took a little plane there. That's where the journey really began for us. When we landed there, we planned out our route, and the lady was like, well, that doesn't seem very reasonable. Do you guys kayak a lot? And we're like, no, this is our first time, but we're both fairly athletic. And so, us being us, we decided to say, yeah, well, you know what, we'll consider your plan, but this is what we're gonna do. Then after that, we loaded all of our stuff onto this giant boat. It actually took us on a short little tour around the bay. Then we got dropped off and we started our trip right off the bat. And we walked around and it was so amazing because there were all these icebergs, and you could walk through them and you could go on top of them, and it was really just amazing. After that, we got back on the kayaks and we kept going, and we ended up camping for the night. At one point or another, I think it was before we got to Chocolate Falls, so they give you all sorts of things, right? And they give you bear mace. Basically, if a bear comes up to you, it's pepper spray for a bear and you spray it at him. Well, if you're lucky, you won't ever have to use it. However, being curious like I am, I decided that I wanted to spray the bear mace. So I asked my dad, I was like, hey, can we spray the bear mace? And he's like, yeah, sure, just remember. He went through the whole thing, just like spray it away from yourself, make sure that the wind is blowing in the same direction that you're spraying, not the opposite direction. I sprayed it. This crap is powerful. It is so powerful. So fast forward a little bit, I decided to spray it again, and I sprayed it away. I did everything that my dad told me to, except the wind was blowing towards me. And so I sprayed it, and well, this is what happened.
Dad, it hurts so bad. It's not funny. It hurts. I tried putting water on. It hurts more.
Preston sprayed bear spray into his eyes.
Running and it makes it better. Using my face. I'm in so much pain. It's like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
It hurts like a bear.
Oh my God.
So as you can imagine, it didn't feel nice, but my dad got a kick out of it, and honestly, I think it's really funny now too. The next morning, we just packed everything up. My eyes were still kind of stinging, and there was spray like in some of my clothes, and so if I wiped my eyes, it would sting again. Anyway, it was bad. But this is where I started to appreciate a lot more. Well, at the time I didn't, but I started to appreciate a lot more what my dad tried to teach me. So we kayaked, it was a beautiful day. We saw a man, he popped out of the cove that goes into Chocolate Falls, and he said, he just yelled at us, he's like, hey, like, don't go in there, like, I couldn't even get in. There's too many icebergs everywhere. And my dad was like, we'll be able to get through. Like, where there's a will, there's a way. Well, my dad was right. I'm very glad that we ended up doing that. We went through, yeah, there were a lot of icebergs and maybe it took a lot more time than it should, but it was an amazing experience because we were just in this cove that was beautiful. You saw this glacier and we saw a giant piece of the glacier just fall off, and then there was the Chocolate Falls, and it really was amazing. The next morning, again, we had to pack up and we started kayaking towards our next camping spot. And I just remember around this time, I remember my dad saying something to me that just really stuck. He said something that I'd never really thought about, and how the prophets would go up to the mountains to talk with God, and how they would use them as temples, essentially. The mountains, the nature, was God's temple. Earth is God's temple, and the prophets would use these mountains to communicate with God. And he said that you feel a lot closer to God when you're out in nature, and I loved that, and it really resonated with me, and it changed my perspective. Then things actually got really tough. We ended up having to kayak across huge waves, but the tide was just really high, and things got really tough getting to our last camping spot. And I remember getting so frustrated because what would have taken us normally like an hour, maybe less, took us like 2.5 hours. And when I get really angry, I get really silent, and he just went silent, and so it was a longer 2 hours, and it was tough. And you know, that goes to the next thing that I learned that was so significant, is that these trips are meant to make us stronger and to gain an appreciation for the bodies that we do have and for the limits that we can push, and then also teach us something about doing hard things and not to run away from them, but to face them head on. And I appreciate that.